I think we need to talk a little bit about Saturn. Can we talk a little bit about Saturn, guys?
Yeah, I like Saturn. I like Saturn.
I like space stuff.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Well, today is the 20th anniversary since the Huygens lander landed on Titan, which is a moon of Saturn.
Yes.
It's 20 years ago today. So I thought we could spend a moment or two just remembering that.
Well, they've got another one coming up in a few years as well.
Yeah. Because I think it is, I consider it, among the most remarkable achievements, engineering achievements, mankind has ever done. I think it's one of, if not the most remarkable NASA mission there ever was. I find it more remarkable in all sorts of ways than the Apollo program.
Well, this one actually happened.
Right.
So that is a big plus straight away.
Right. You believe in this one?
Yes.
Okay. Because I remember it happening at the time. I was already in my early 20s, mid-20s at the time. And I was just sort of blown away by it. And seeing as it was 20 years ago today, and I'm on a one-man mission here at Lotus Eaters to rescue us from full slop status. So with my history and space-themed content, hopefully I'll draw us back from the very brink of.
And Titan is a really interesting place as well, because we get sucked into talking about planets. Really, if we talk about worlds, because moons are just as viable. Yeah. And after Earth, Titan is easily the most interesting world in our solar system.
Titan is unique in all sorts of ways. For a start, it's massive. It's a giant moon. It's bigger than Mercury, for example.
Yeah.
It's the only other place other than the Earth in the solar system with a permanent thick atmosphere. There are other places with tiny gossamer thin atmospheres, but Titan's atmosphere is even thicker than Earth's atmosphere.
It's about 5 times the thickness of Earth's atmosphere.
It's completely covered in an atmosphere. One of the reasons why it was so mysterious is because a lot of the moons, we can just, like our moon, we can just see the surface of it. Yeah. But you can't see the surface of Titan, so it was always a complete mystery to us. Yes. So NASA sent up the Cassini-Huygens mission. So it was the Cassini was the overall probe, and it had a lander on it called Huygens. These are named after 18th century astronomers, mathematicians, polymaths, whatever you want to call them. Giovanni Cassini and Christian Huygens, who both studied Saturn. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was Huygens that discovered Titan. So the Huygens lander is aptly named. Can we play, or I can play the first little thing if we have the audio off.
Elliptical orbit over the planet's poles, and daringly through gaps in the rim.
We'll just let this play while we're talking. Again, heads up to people, this segment is going to be a lot better if you're actually watching it rather than listening to it, because I've got all sorts of images and things. So Saturn is probably my favourite planet. I'm absolutely fascinated by, all of it, but I'm fascinated by the Sun, by Mars, and by Saturn and the Saturnian system, and for obviously all sorts of different reasons. But Saturn, a lot of people like Saturn. It's like considered the jewel of, that's Enceladus, the jewel of the solar system. If Jupiter is sort of the king, Saturn is in all sorts of ways the jewel, because it's very, very beautiful in all sorts of ways. Least of all its ring system. But it's got many moons, as Jupiter has. I mean, so many that we just keep adding to the number of them all the time. Depends what you really classify as a moon even. Some say that Saturn's got as many as 80 moons plus. Others say it's more like 140 odd. The reality is...
few big ones though, really no.
Oh yeah. 8 or so very big ones. Again, depends how you measure it, how you count it, what ones you count as big ones. That's Enceladus as well. So I thought we could just take a look at it. I think that was the orbit of when Cassini finally, because it orbited Saturn for like 13 odd years, and at the very end of those 13 years plunged into Saturn itself. But there you go. These are all real images.
About that probe is while they're going round and around, you can probably see from the graphic before, they basically went through the ring.
Or between Saturn and the rings, eventually, yeah. Actually,
a number of times they just went through the ring.
Well,
and you'd think that would be impossible because it looks like a solid disc, but actually up close, there's massive distances between anything actually in that ring, and the probability of hitting anything as you go through is is virtually non-existent.
I don't think it actually went through any of the rings because it was be travelling too fast. Even sort of a micro collision would be enough to.
Oh, but those rings were a lot less dense than you think.
Yeah. I'm always blown away by the images, and especially the very good ones by Hubble or even JWST, or the images that Cassini sent back. Just absolutely fascinated by it. So let's go to the next link. I'll let Samson do this. Can you go to the next link? Just some pictures of Saturn. And now the ring system is temporary. I mean, it may be there for hundreds of thousands of years or even a million year or two, something like that. But we're actually lucky to be alive at the time when Saturn has rings, at least rings as pronounced as that.
The two big features of the solar system, one is the eye on Jupiter. That's temporary. That will probably be gone in 50 to 70 years. It's just a storm. And the rings as well, that will just collapse down into a series of moons.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Although Uranus has a bit of a ring.
Yeah, Jupiter's got a ring.
Yeah. But the Uranus one keeps on solidifying and then breaking up again. You're smirking.
Just the word ring is just funny.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so I mean, those, if you go to the next link, or next few links, just images. I mean, what an incredible thing. So at the North Pole there, that hexagon-shaped sort of permanent storm, when we first got decent images of it, people thought that was sort of, crazy types think it's some sort of portal to another world or whatever. But it turns out that it is just a matter of physics. If you have a round container, and the viscosity of the thing, the thickness of the medium is particularly right, and you spin the centre at a particular speed, and the outside of it isn't spinning anywhere near as fast, then you will end up with that hexagon-shaped thing. They've done that in the lab, so it's not sort of crazy or unexplainable. That is just physics. There you go. That's the auroras. You do have aurora on Saturn, so that's sort of the solar wind skipping off the top of Saturn there, and the bottom. That's it in the infrared.
That's where the spaceship opens up.
Is that
right? Yeah.
Is that the Pride version of Saturn?
Saturn in June.
It's beautiful, really, isn't it? That's a James Webb image. Now the winds are particularly fast. Not as fast as Neptune, but the winds, it looks like, sort of it's a gas giant, and you think it looks quite sedate, but actually the winds there are sort of 1,500, 1,900 miles per hour, or is it kilometres an hour? Winds whipping through Saturn. I mean, that also has sometimes giant storms, like on Jupiter.
That sounds worse than than Neptune, I think. I read somewhere there that we had 400 kilometers per hour winds, and that it's one of the worst in the solar system. Is that what? Let me.
That's much worse than Earth.
Okay.
Yes.
Neptune is the worst. Neptune is like sort of a true hellscape. The winds on Neptune are ridiculous. Yeah. Saturn's not quite as bad.
Saturn could be a future superpower of the solar system because unlike because Jupiter's got a lot of moons around it, but it's just a shed ton of radiation, which doesn't make it fun. Whereas Saturn is actually quite stable, so you could set up in the moons around it like Titan. But also the upper atmosphere of Saturn is really rich in helium-3, which you want for nuclear fusion. So it's a very viable place. In fact, I'll say more when we come on to Titan, but you've got loads of hydrocarbons and other stuff that you need for colony building as well.
It says about 500 miles per hour near its equator. Its winds in Saturn. That's fast. That's a fast wind.
I thought it was much faster than that. I thought it was 2 or 3 times faster than that.
Well, maybe that's you.
Just provisional. Maybe
I think at the
they say 1,100 meters per second. Maybe that.
Okay. So either way, if there were a surface, if you stood on it, it would be hellacious compared to Earth conditions. But yeah, there's the rings. You can see there's sort of shadows in it. It's sort of the ring system is sort of almost impossibly delicate and intricate, isn't it? And you have various moons sort of within it. Some of the swept out areas, because moons, or even shepherd moons, they sometimes call them, are sort of inside the ring system.
Do you know how many Earths?
You can see sort of one of the moons there, sort of sweeping out. Sorry, go ahead.
How many Earths would fit there?
I think isn't
we're really tiny in comparison to Saturn.
I know the Earth would fit easily inside that hexagon-shaped storm on the North Pole, easily.
Oh, you get several in there.
Yeah.
Although interesting, okay, so Earth is the densest planet in the solar system, and Saturn is the least dense planet in the solar system. Down to the point where if you had a bath big enough, Saturn would actually float in it. It's very undense. But the reason that's interesting is if you were, and this would be a long way in the future, if you were to build a shell around the outside of Saturn, even though it is heavier than Earth, because it's greater volume, on the outside of that shell you'd have the same gravity as you have on Earth.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. So actually, in the far future, we could build a shell around it and have like a massive Earth with like normal gravity.
That would be good.
You can see, like, the thing, just pause on that one for a moment. The thing that blows my mind is that, I mean, these are real images. These aren't sort of artists' impressions. And I know it's really obvious to say it, but when you sort of ponder for a moment or dwell or muse on the fact that that's really there, like now, as we speak, that's there now, and that's real. It's sort of easy to forget, or it's sort of abstract. You think, oh yeah, that's just something that is so distant and so remote that it may as well be a fiction, but it's really there. I don't know. I think men have always been fascinated by the rings of Saturn.
Wisdom begins in wonder.
Yeah. Who said that?
I think Aristotle.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's a good one. Yeah, so the moons, if we move on to sort of the moons, well, there's a close-up of it. And you can see... there you can see a shepherd moon. I don't know whether there's one called Prometheus, there's one called Pan. Well, there's a few dozen of them. But you can see it sort of causes a ripple. Can you go back to that image, actually, Samson? You can see that it sort of, not only has sort of swept out a clean bit in the rings, where it's gone round and round billions of times, but it's also its gravitational effect on the ring itself, right near it, sort of causing a type of ripple as it goes along. So, yeah, we've already said that the rings of Saturn will eventually be gone or disappear, but they're also a dynamic thing. They're not sort of static at all. And in fact, they affect those smaller moons. And of course, those moons affect the rings themselves. But there you go. There's so much to say. God, I've only got a few minutes left. Got so much. Go to the next one. Did I say play that at a particular point? I think I asked that one to be teed up at a particular point.
We ought to cover Titan as well, because Titan's...
Yeah, we'll get to Huygens itself. Well, anyway, there was a clip in... I love Astrum. This is one of my favourite space channels, Astrum. There was a bit in that where it showed a little bit of footage of one of the shepherd moons, sort of where its orbit is slightly elliptical, coming closer and further away slightly from one of the rings, and showing the sort of ripple effect it has on the ring. But anyway, if anyone's interested, you can go and sort of find that for yourself. Okay, so Enceladus. Enceladus is absolutely fascinating to me. Along with Europa, it might be one of the places in the solar system where there's, there is a subsurface water ocean underneath there, and there might be aliens in that ocean, possibly. In fact, I think a lot of scientists suspect that Enceladus is going to be more likely a better place to find life than even Europa, but Enceladus is so much further away, so much more remote.
Well, actually, there could well be life on Titan as well. Not very
microbial, maybe.
Yeah, it's
microbial.
They've got these lakes of methane.
Yeah. I was leaving Titan to the end.
Right,
so look, here are some of the. Well, that's Prometheus. That's one. A Pan. Earlier there was one called Pan, which is very, very odd shape. Where it's going through the ring system and sort of getting all around its equator, effectively, like a giant build-up. But okay, go to the next link entirely, if you would. So there it is. There's Cassini and Huygens there, whilst it was being, so it gives you an idea of the scale. There it is again. Just quite a remarkable thing. I mean, people give NASA a bunch of crap, but they've done a few things that have been absolutely remarkable, in my opinion. Is that Pan again? Anyway, some extremely odd shaped bodies in the Saturnian system. Keep going forward. What's that one called? I can't remember what that one's called, but that is obviously it looks like it's some sort of pumice stone, doesn't it?
It looks like a sponge.
Yeah.
Or maybe not.
Yeah. Oh, Hyperion. That one's called Hyperion. That's Rhea. Obviously heavily cratered. That's Enceladus. The thing about Enceladus I was starting to talk about was the idea that underneath the crust is an ocean of water. And we know that because there's sort of outpluming sort of not cryovolcanoes, but just we can see that it blasts out giant plumes. And I think Cassini even passed through those plumes and was able to quote unquote taste them to tell that it is in fact water. So if and when we get to Europa and find out that the ocean is completely dead, not all is lost.
Yeah.
We've still got Enceladus. There you go. There's an incredible image of the water spouts, mainly around the South Pole of Enceladus. I mean, again, that's a real image. That's real. That's happening now. It's out there now. Blows my mind. And that's sort of an idea of that it might be hydrothermal vents, exactly like on Europa. Okay, that's Iapetus. Iapetus, arguably one of the strangest objects in the whole solar system. Iapetus, look how the colour difference between... in the 2001 A Space Odyssey, in the film, they make it that they're going to Jupiter. But in the book, the original Arthur C. Clarke book, they go to Saturn. Right. And the big monolith thing is on Iapetus. But for some reason, well, there are reasons, but... they decided for the film they'll just make it about Jupiter instead. But and you can see that around its equator, that ridge, that strange sort of enigmatic ridge. There's a few different ideas of why that is, why it looks like that, but we don't know completely. There's a better view of it, really. And it is massive. I think that's like 10, 12 miles high, that mountain range, that ridge, running sort of perfectly, nearly all the way around the equator. There you go. What an odd thing. Those are mountains that are bigger than Everest. Because on smaller worlds, you can have bigger mountains, can't you?
Well, less gravity, so there's not so much force pulling it down.
Exactly. You can only have a finite height of mountains, depending on how big or how strong your gravity is on whatever body it is. Play this. We don't need the sound, but play this. And this is the Huygens probe that they landed on Titan. So Titan's the biggest moon by a long way of Saturn. It's a particularly large moon. Well, as you say, it's probably better to call it a world, right? It's not a planet, but it's a world in its own right, with a hard rocky surface, and as you said, lots and lots of hydrocarbons. Well, giant lakes, seas even, of liquid methane on the surface.
It's the only other place in the solar system you can have a barbecue. The difference is on Earth you need to supply the fuel, whereas on Titan you've got lumps of methane set around all over the place. On Titan you supply the oxygen, but it's still the only other place on the Earth on the solar system you can do that.
I was going to say, you want to be quite careful lighting a Zippo standing next to an ocean of methane. Yeah. Actually, without oxygen, anyway. So again, these are real images of another world. That is the surface of Titan. 20 years ago today. That's why I'm talking about all this today, because it is the anniversary. A remarkable, and you can see that there's been geological processes going on. Obviously not sort of the water cycle that we have on Earth, but it'll be sort of a methane cycle. It rains methane, clouds of methane. And over the eons it's carved out valleys and canyons and estuaries. And mind-blowing.
There is still a lot of water ice locked in the crust as well. Yep. So this makes it a really good candidate for colonisation because, I mean, for a start, even now, you can go outside on Titan with a very warm winter jacket. You need an oxygen mask and a very warm winter jacket, but it is doable. Yeah. No, you can.
think it's like 180 degrees Celsius below.
It's minus 180.
Yeah.
But it depends on the wind speed, really, as to how. But I mean, with a really good Arctic jacket and an oxygen mask, you can do it. You'd probably be better off with something a little bit more.
Minus 290 Fahrenheit. I'd want more than a warm winter jacket.
Well,
it's scarf.
Yeah, but you're not Scottish. So, you could get around. Right. The other really fascinating thing I found about Titan is that you can fly on it, because I mentioned that the atmosphere is 5 times stronger, but the gravity is about 7 times less. So the average human can jump from a standing start about 1.5 feet in the air. So the average human would be able to jump 11.5 feet in the air on Titan. So the atmosphere is stronger and the gravity is lower. So what that means is, if you got a proper, a pair of like wings or
Icarus
something,
wings,
yeah, you could actually fly on Titan. And even without the Icarus wings, just with your arms, a human would probably better fly about as well as a chicken can fly on Earth.
That's not bad. I'll take that.
A bit of a leap and a flap.
I'll take that. Yeah. And there you go. That's the surface. That is the surface of Titan. Standard. A real image.
It needs to be in HD though, doesn't it?
You'll see. Yeah, I mean, it was 2005. You'll see a shadow flitter across the ground in a moment, I believe, and that is the shadow of the giant parachute. Oh, it says it in parachute, as it was sort of abandoned and flew away. But there you go. I would love to talk a lot more about this. Loads more I could say, loads more I've had to say, but I've run out of time.
There can be a follow-up segment at some point.
But I just think it's worth remembering the Cassini-Huygens mission.
Yes.
20 years ago today, when Huygens landed on Titan.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see what else we're doing, you could always go to our website and watch our series Lads Hour, where we have a bit of fun. This time we're making outlandish predictions for 2025, and if you want to see all the other things that we're putting out, you can always follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.